One of the things we see in the book of Job is really the most helpful thing his three friends do is sit with him in silence after all the tragedies befall him of the loss of his children and his slaves and animals and property and his physical illness and infirmity. When they start speaking and basically saying, well, you must have done something wrong to have all these terrible things happen to you, they cease to be helpful to him. And in Job chapter 16 and 17, Job reaffirms his innocence and then prays once again to God for relief. And in chapter 16, it's interesting because he starts out saying, I have heard many such things. Miserable comforters are you all, have windy words no limits. And I think all of us can learn from this that when someone is really coping with a heartbreaking tragedy, the less we say, the better. Often simply coming, offering a hug, a handshake, and saying, I'm terribly, terribly sorry, is perhaps more helpful than getting into explanations. You may also find it interesting if you do the suggested shorter reading for today, which is chapter 16, verse 1 to chapter 17, verse 16, to read and to look for how many allusions, how many verses actually sound like the experience of Jesus in his suffering. For example, in Job 16 and verse 10, it says, they have gaped at me with their mouths. They have struck me insolently on the cheek. They mass themselves together against me. God gives me up to the ungodly and casts me into the hands of the wicked. Doesn't that sound like the experience of Jesus at his trial, where the soldier slaps him, and at his suffering and crucifixion? And in verse 20, which is our verse for the day, it says simply, my friends scorn me. My eye pours out tears to God. What a hard place for Job to be. I hope for you and for most of us that when we are in a terrible time of loss, of grief, of physical pain or suffering, that we do have at least one or two friends who are with us and who help us and support us and pray for us and encourage us in a way that is a blessing, rather than being stuck like poor Job with friends who only make him feel worse. And in chapter 17, Job prays for relief, which again is an appropriate response when our heart is heavy and breaking. I pray that if you are wrestling with a particularly difficult situation today, that you have a friend or two that you can contact, and that you will pour out your honest emotions to God in prayer, as Job does.